In order for you to make someone buy your sales systems or your sales automation, you need to sell things. Now, I know you're thinking, Saad, that's obvious. I know this. Well, let me tell you that after talking with hundreds of freelancers and beginners in the automation space, most have no idea what to sell, how to sell it, and what to say. They lead with tools and they talk features. But people only buy when they see that the value is directly tied to their revenue. And that's the real power of sales systems because it's directly tied to money. And after having quite the journey going from a nightclub bouncer to a freelancer, then scaling a sales team agency to 105K a month, I realized that the real power of automation isn't the tech. It's in lead generation that leads to real outcomes. And by real outcomes, I mean clients. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to actually sell sales systems. I'm going to pull back the curtain on my own sales framework that I used. This is by far the most helpful video you'll watch about selling sales automation because it's not going to be just theory, it's practical tactics that I've personally used. And the reason I'm doing this is to give you guys a simple framework to start being profitable rather than just being a builder. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, stay tuned and let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing you need to understand to sell sales systems or sales automation is you need to sell the engine and the destination. Now, you might be wondering, Saad, well, what does that mean? Well, it's actually very, very simple. Now, we all know that AI and automation is an engine, okay? And humans build the engine, right? And engines get us to a destination / an outcome, right? Everyone knows this. Now, we also know that AI and automation, when used right, leads to an outcome, okay? And since we are in business, the outcome would be money, right? So the outcome will always be money. And since we operate in a market and that market has B2B and B2C, and we need to adhere to the rules of that market, we need to understand that most B2B and B2C businesses want to make money. So what do? We use sales automation to make them money. And the way we do this is we get them in front of buyers and decision makers that are interested in whatever they are offering, right? Now, in the old days, people would have to meet in person, shake hands, pay in cash to be able to make money. Well, now, business owners and people in general meet in Zoom, shake hands with pixels, and send the money through Stripe or Wire, okay? And what I mean by that is the principle hasn't changed, okay? Conversations leads to closes, which means money, okay? So again, sales automation is the engine and the destination or the outcome is the value derived from it. So it's always going to be some sort of conversation or a call that leads to a close because that's how money is made. Well, now that we understand the principle behind sales automation, how do we actually turn this into a simple way to explain it to prospects in a way that's conducive to the end goal, which is them giving us money? Because drumroll, in order for you to make money with sales automation or in business in general, you need to sell things, okay? Which means people need to see the value in what you're offering to be able to purchase from you. Well, I'm going to be sharing with you my simple framework, okay? So we frame logic by going from a consultative approach. You're not a salesperson, okay? And we use emotion at the same time because contrary to popular belief, a clear offer in 2025 is not just a logical one. It's a logical and emotional one because humans make decisions of emotion 95% of the time. So in order for you to make someone purchase from you or buy your sales systems or your sales automation, you need to understand the limits of their psychology first, the biases that their brain has that we all have, so you can leverage them, okay? Because if you can understand how your prospect's brain works, what to say, you'll get them to purchase from you. It's literally sales 101. And it's essentially what most freelancers and people who want to sell automations don't know about, okay? So I learned how to leverage this when I first got started, and it has enabled me to scale my agency to over 7 figures. And by the way, this is not a very shiny topic. It's not fancy. And it's usually the unsexy things in life that actually make you money. So I really need you to pay attention to this, okay? So how do we leverage this to sell sales automation? Well, we use something called reward and punishment super response tendency. Now, I mentioned this in my podcast with my good friend Nick Rive, so definitely check that that out? So this, in essence, or in plain English, just basically means that people do things for a reason, okay? Humans are predictable, reliable, and can be tracked. And the reason people do things is because of two reasons, which is reward and punishment. In other words, pleasure or pain. Now, I know this might sound Machiavellian, but I really need you to pay attention to this. And by the way, what I mean by super response is that humans have this tendency to respond to incentives, which is reward, or pain, which is punishment, okay? So buyers or people in general have a massive bias to draw to the reward. Obviously, the ants go where the sugar lies, right? Everyone knows this. So the reason why my business model worked, and essentially why I focused on sales automation and in sales systems rather than just the typical automation agency, and the reason why it was extremely effective and worked insanely well, because it's basically a reward system. It simply made sense for prospects because the end goal or the outcome they are getting is an interested decision maker in their offer, which led into a conversation with that decision maker, which later on led to a client for that company. Okay? So there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and he said, "To persuade a man, appeal to interest, not to reason." Okay, so if you want a prospect to buy your sales system, they have to have some sense or a strong sense that in the process, they would be benefiting themselves way more. Okay, and to give you a prime example, I mean, think about it. If you are selling to like a B2B company, right? And usually their LTV is like 100K. If you guys are wondering what LTV is, basically the lifetime value of each client that they onboard. Okay, so every conversation / intro / meeting you book for them is potentially worth 6 figures. And you can leverage that in a way that if they are not willing to work with you, they will be missing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because you need to understand that people don't buy their way to pleasure. They buy their way out of pain. Okay? So now that you understand that people act out of self-interest, the next move is not to pitch. So I'm going to teach you the consultative approach, which is essentially what I've used and what I use every single day. So it's to investigate and come from a consultative approach. It's like a doctor uncovering the real symptoms before prescribing anything. Okay, so you're not a salesperson pushing a system. You're simply using that system as a vehicle that leads to the outcome that we talked about. Now you're an expert who understands their business, not someone throwing tech at problems, which is unfortunately what most entrepreneurs and beginners in this space, they're just throwing tech and systems at problems that people actually don't experience, that they're not experiencing any pain that this system is going to solve, right? So it's a 3-step framework: diagnose, prescribe, and quantify the outcome. Okay, what I mean by diagnose is starts by understanding who they sell to, what's their current process looks like, what's broken or inefficient, and what winning would look like, which means their real outcome, which is always going to be more money. Okay, always keep that in mind. It's always going to be more money. The second step is prescribe. Now you position your system like a medicine. Okay, and you only present it after the pain is clear. Okay, and the third step is going to be quantify the outcome. You need to tie the system directly to their revenue, to their end identity that they want to be in after they use your system, after getting the outcomes of the system. Okay, so if they tell you, okay, one client is worth plus 30K, then you can say, well, if we get you 5 intros per month, how much money would you be making? Okay, now you're tying that to the outcome, which is again, like I said, more money. Okay. Now let's just go ahead and walk you through my 3-part consultative sales framework for sales systems. This is specifically for sales automation agencies. Okay. So the general flow that I use, which feels more natural plus consultative, is that the first thing you want to do is you obviously want to build reports. So it's going to be like 2 to 3 minutes where it's light, friendly, where you set the tone and you confirm the agenda. I always like to ask, and this is essentially how I train plus 20 sales reps right now, is you want to ask something like, what made you interested in this system? Why me? Early on, okay? So once they answer, you can position the rest of the conversation around that specific outcome they want, and it makes the whole call feel way more relevant and tailored specifically for them. And the best way is just to ask them what led them to this point. You just simply ask someone, what do you actually want? What are you hoping to achieve from this system? Why is sales automation a priority right now? Okay? And then what you do is you price anchor. And again, I mentioned this in my podcast, again, with my good friend, Nick Ryev. So you want to basically price anchor early on, right? Just enough to frame the expectation, because you need to understand that people are so used to listening to this beautiful presentation, what the system does, etc., etc. And at the end, the last 5 minutes, they're expecting the price, which is the big question that everyone is scared of. So what do? We pitch the price early on. Now we're not stressed anymore, right? Okay, we removed all that pressure. Okay, so what you would do, you would say, hey, most people we work with invest around X amount of dollars for Y results. Again, what I'm doing is I'm tying everything to ROI. I'm tying everything to the outcome. Okay, I'll walk you through what that looks like and we can see if it makes sense based on where you're at. Boom. Now pressure is gone, pattern disrupted. Okay, now we want to dig deep into their word. So now that the pressure is gone, now they will ask you the real questions. Okay, so now it's time to go deep into their business model, pain points, current stack, goals, etc. Because now that the price isn't hanging over their head, you can flip it. You could say, hey, cool, before I explain the nuts and bolts, mind if I ask you a few questions so I can tailor it to you properly? So from there, now they will start asking the real questions like, how does it work? How do you get those results? What's included? Can I buy the system hands off? And by hands off meaning just a system. And that's your green light to now reveal the full system with confidence. And now it's essentially going to be a system walkthrough, which is 10 to 15 minutes. Now we can explain how the system works, but it's tailored to their word. Again, benefits over features. Just keep that in mind. Always tie it to the end outcome. So you're not explaining features like I said, you're showing how it fits their specific setup or solves their exact bottleneck. And the last step is to essentially just close. So that's how you actually sell sales systems. Always remember that business owners and buyers only care about outcomes. So position your automation as a way to get them to that outcome. And that's how you become irreplaceable in a beast and a space in no time. So get out there, take action. I believe in you, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.